So decorating in the house at the weekend over Easter?
All weekend, more on me than the walls, I think. But yeah, decorating a nursery and another room as well.
A nursery?
Yeah.
Exciting. This is a bit of news then?
Yeah, so a little one on the way. Exciting, but scary at the same time.
Is this the first nursery you've had to decorate, so to speak?
It is. So yeah.
Did you have to decide pink or blue, or did you go halfway?
No, we went purple. So yeah, pretty much halfway, yeah.
Okay, so it could be either then when it comes along, you don't know.
That's it, yeah. So.
Good. Excellent. Okay, well, that's exciting news. When's the due date?
So 8th of June, so not long now, yeah.
Summer baby.
6 weeks or so.
I'm a summer baby as well, which now I'm an adult, I really appreciate because you can have parties in the garden. But when I was at school, I think youngest at school wasn't really a pain. But
yeah, no, I agree. So no, my birthday's the 15th of June as well, and there's a theme in our families of the daughter being born the day before the dad, or birthday anyway, and that runs on my side and the other half side. So it's potentially
great.
Touch and go. So we'll see.
Well, exciting news anyway.
It
Good
is.
luck to your wife.
Thank you.
Hope it all goes well.
Appreciate
we'll
it.
We'll have to hear back from you and update our listeners in June as to how all that went.
Yes,
all the
some
vital
photos
statistics.
overall.
Put those on the next podcast.
That's
Exactly.
it, yeah.
Great. Well, we've got to start our podcast then.
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Every week we try and come up with some interesting stuff that you as a business owner or manager might find useful in your efforts to grow your small and medium-sized enterprise. And this week we have a guest again, so it's my delight to welcome into the studio James Willis. Hello, James.
Hi, David. Thank you ever so much for having me.
Not at all. Thanks for coming all the way over here. We do like having guests in the studio rather than on screens, so thanks a lot for making the journey. Now, today's episode, if you've been scrolling down the list of subjects, is quite an interesting one I found because it's a subject that I've known about for a long time, I've thought about, but I'm not sure what my understanding is of where it works and where it doesn't. And that's why I wanted to explore a lot more today. And that's on the subject of telemarketing and getting leads through using an outsourced telemarketing agency. And just to whet your appetite, we'll have some horror stories towards the end of the episode where we could talk about where maybe it went wrong and didn't quite go to plan. But I'm really interested, for the benefit of our listeners, to find out a bit more about it. But why don't we start with just giving a brief introduction to the company that you work for?
Of course. So, Exceptional Thinking. So we've been around now for 20 years. It's actually our 20th anniversary this year. I've not been there all that time. I came into the company in February 2020, which was a terrible time to start a job, if you remember a small thing called the pandemic.
Small thing, yeah. I think I vaguely remember that.
Started as a telemarketer. I'm now operations director and have been since late 2021. So we have always been a sales and marketing business. Okay, we used to do copywriting, we used to do content creation, that sort of thing. Pandemic really crystallized our focus on being a solely lead generation and telemarketing firm. And that's what we do, and that's what we do alone now. 16 members of the team, split roughly 60% of those being telemarketers and the other guys being in the administration and the account management team. And yeah, working across various sectors.
And you work across the UK?
All across the UK, yeah. We've done a little bit on the east coast of the States as well, and dived into Europe a little bit too. So, but yeah, predominantly UK based.
And you're a co-owner of that business, so you also sort of our intended audience for this podcast, really. How do you grow a business like that? And I know coming on podcast helps, but we're interested in sort of digging under the surface a little bit, really, and finding out as much as where it doesn't work as where it does. And I think there's a lot of authenticity in trying to sell and market your own products. You've got to be honest about where it isn't necessarily for everybody.
That's it, and that's how you learn and grow, isn't it? By understanding where you've gone wrong and how to put it right, and what you're going to do next time in a situation like that.
So why don't we sort of start in time-honoured fashion then with a definition? You know, what is telemarketing, lead generation, different types of it, that type of thing. So how would you define it?
Of course. So I think it's important to point out that there is a subtle difference between the historic sort of telesales. That tends to be more B2C focused. If you can imagine a call centre, picking up the phone 100 times a day, asking if people are interested in PPI or whatever it might be. Where we sit, and what this podcast is really about, is the business-to-business lead generation and telemarketing. So when we say there are different types, we refer to lead generation. So there could be email marketing. There are businesses out there that will send out, targeted emails to your target audience. They will come back to you with your hit rate, who's opened, who's followed through. Often there's lead magnets there where people can fill out data and that gets instantly uploaded to your CRM. There's that sort. There's LinkedIn only. So a lot of people will use LinkedIn as a bit of a blunt instrument to go, this is what we do. Are you interested? And then, of course, there's telemarketing and the mix of the three. So, approaching people via LinkedIn, warming them up with telemarketing, building rapport, building pipeline, whether that's in a month or whether that's 10 conversations in 2 years, and that telemarketing rapport building really, gets going then.
That longer term view you take it on. But the bit that did make me smile was that I first heard about your company through an email. I thought, well, you'd think I would have got a phone call, wouldn't you, if it's a telemarketing company? But you described there very well that it's actually the bringing together of the different channels, LinkedIn, email, and the phone, that is your particular modus operandi.
That's it. And I think from initial outreach, follow-up is so key at every single stage of lead generation, whether it's after the initial message, whether it's after the phone call, sending you an email, or whether it's after an email that you receive 3 months after you first engage, then receiving a phone call. And it's just making sure that you're on top of everything and you're actually speaking to people, you're constantly engaging with people, because if you're not... Conversation
that you want to have then, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I'd imagine a lot of our listeners have got an image of telemarketing, telemarketeers, telemarketing companies, which is probably formed by those calls we get, cold calls, bludgeoning us into getting a new photocopier or a phone contract or electricity bill, but like you say, that's more like telesales really, isn't it? That's not so much what you would define as telemarketing.
Telemarketing is calling with a purpose. It's calling to follow up on something. It's calling and introducing yourself, actually asking if they've got time to speak to the person on the other end of the phone, which is something that, doesn't always happen, but it's calling with that purpose, explaining who you are, what you do, and then asking open questions and not necessarily selling to people. And I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, but what you're doing is you're asking lots of open questions about where their business are and actually how you can tie that back to how you can help them, rather than just, this is my intention, I'm going to get to the bottom of my sales pitch.
I'd like to think that if I were doing that for myself or in-house with a team, that you'd want, it's all part of your brand, isn't it? Your company doesn't want to get a bad reputation because you're bludgeoning people into conversations they don't want to have. So you would take a much more sympathetic view. So you've got to make sure that if you're going to use an agency, that they're on brand with you and they have an approach that's sympathetic with the way that you do business, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
But it's not for everybody, right? The telemarketing works well for some companies. We're talking now particularly a B2B environment, but not for others. So have you formed a sort of a rule of thumb as to when it might work and when it might not? There'll always be exceptions. But
I think the key for us is actually this will work in the B2B environment across pretty much all sectors. What we need to understand, and we try to understand from the outset, is actually, can we partner with this business? Can we communicate with this business? And actually, do our morals and our values fit with those of the business that we're working with? And if the answer to all of those is yes, then okay, it's someone and something we can work with. We've got tools available where we can really understand, get under the skin of our client's business and really just know what they do and work alongside them to create, building that knowledge base of their products, their services. If we don't have that from the outset, if it's just go and get me some leads, then you're not necessarily the business that we want to work with. And actually, I think most lead generation and telemarketing companies would feel the same way. Actually, it's got to be a partnership, and it can't just be get me some leads and I'll speak to you next month. It doesn't necessarily work like that. So,
but there must also be an equation here around lifetime value and the cost of acquisition of a new lead, and then a conversion rate. It's not going to be working for a very transactional B2B business that's doing one-off sales with no longer term relationship from them, is it? So it's got to have the right type of B2B with enough value in it to be worth paying reasonable amount of money to get a new lead.
Yeah, your income's got to outweigh your spend, and you've got to make more than you're spending on it. I think with that, we need to understand actually from each of our clients, okay, what is your average client lifetime value? Okay, what is your conversion rate? We know our own conversion rates from the leads that we supply our clients, which is around the 40% mark.
That's an average of quite a range though, is it? Or do you tend to find your approach has narrowed that range down quite a lot?
It's interesting. So two of the sectors pull in sort of almost similar directions. So right at the top end, some of the business coaches and people like that we work with, they have a higher conversion rate. At the other end of that scale, we have some of the technology providers, and by that I mean sort of ERP implementation specialists, where they're single figure conversion rate, but of course that is a much higher contract value. And they almost pull in equal directions as well. And in the middle is where we get that sort of range and that figure of around the 40% mark.
Right, okay. So maybe this is a good point then to talk about how you go about doing it. What's the magic here? Because if I were to set up a telemarketing agency with no knowledge of how it works at all, recruit a load of people, give them a load of phone numbers to ring and say, right, bash that lot, and I'd fail very quickly, I'm sure. So you found a successful method that works for you and for your clients, and you described it to me the other day as to how that works, and it sounded a bit different, which I was quite interested by. So talk me through a little bit about how you go about it, because I think that will help maybe dispel some of the bad feelings I had about how this might work. You seem to have a more sympathetic approach.
Yeah, it comes back to three things when we're starting a campaign. It's data, people, message. Before all of that, we are understanding exactly who the business are, what they do, ideal target client, and what a well-qualified appointment looks like. So we get under the skin of what all that looks like. From there, we will go away, we will have a look at LinkedIn, and we will identify a target prospect market for that business. We will send all of this over to our clients before we do anything, though. We want to make sure that it's the right people that we're targeting. From there, we will do an initial outreach on LinkedIn. So that'll be a connection message designed to get people connecting back.
Is that using the in-mail thing, or are you just trying to connect to them?
It's connecting people. We do use a bit of automation with the connections only. Now that's Linked Helper, which I don't know if you're aware of. Now that is a tool that will allow us to send out connection requests, on a basis, and it sends them out 100 a week on a timed basis to sort of fly beneath the LinkedIn algorithms. Once they've connected back, what they will receive is a follow-up message. And that's not, sometimes you click, accept, and all of a sudden someone fires through a PDF and it's like,
that.
No, please go away. I don't know.
Why did I connect this thing?
Yeah. So,
just if I pause there for a minute, I'm not quite sure what people's attitude is as well as to whether to accept LinkedIn connection requests from complete strangers. And I've heard some people take a very strong view one way to say, no, unless I know them and I'm prepared to recommend them. LinkedIn is all about referral networks, so I'm only going to do that. Other people think, no, actually LinkedIn is a valuable marketing tool. The bigger my audience, the more reach I'm going to get for my messaging, so I'll accept requests from anybody, and other people in between. Do you find that you're only dealing with the latter form that accept all sorts, or do you find ways into those that are maybe a bit more guarded, but you've got a message that they're prepared to open up?
Yeah, well, it's because of the way that we really go in depth as to what the target market looks like with our clients. So it's got to be a specific industry that's relevant to them, and it's got to be a specific geography, let's say, and a decision maker at a certain level. And then the way that we craft the message actually is to lead with, hey, look, it would be great to be part of your network. Just so you know, we work in this sector. Maybe even put a piece of news or something like that. You've only got a limited number of characters in the connection message. So just something that's relevant, that's something that's going to really get them thinking, actually, do you know what? Yeah, let's click accept. So yeah, I think.
So you start out with that, but then you start out with you do your market research, having established you understand the business well, and then your initial outreach is through LinkedIn, but not the in-mail blast. It's more of a legitimate connection request, but using some software that helps you to speed it up. I didn't realize there was a LinkedIn algorithm to spot people doing that, but I'm glad there is. Otherwise, we'd all have hundreds of them. Yeah, quite. Okay, so that's the first step. Then what happens next?
So then we send that follow-up message that I mentioned. Now, you'll hear me talk about high impact statement a couple of times, but what that essentially is a follow-up message that says, look, thanks for connecting. I work for X, Y, and Z company. This is what we do. This is who we do it for, and these are the results we achieve. Okay, so it's really explaining what they do and actually putting some fact and some evidence around what they've just said. Okay, and we're doing this in our clients' LinkedIn on their behalf, so it needs to be right. Again, all of this stuff is that we craft with our clients to make sure they're happy with it. So that's really step one. Okay, so and LinkedIn's great. It's let's face it, it is a giant CRM system, or it's certainly a giant prospect list. So once we've done that, that's where our telemarketing team get involved, and this is really the meat on the bone, if you like. And this is where there is a difference between telesales that I mentioned and this intelligent telemarketing that we're carrying out. It's picking up the phone to a prospect, delivering that high impact statement again to them, asking them if they remember the connection, but then asking lots of open questions and not trying to sell to people who don't want to be sold to. So understanding, okay, lots of open questions. How is your business faring in this space? What would you like to see improved in your business? That sort of thing.
An unsolicited call, or do you agree with the person over LinkedIn that we'll have a call?
It's unsolicited in the sense that we pick up the phone out of the blue. Okay, we always ask if they're available to talk and if now's a good time, and we'll introduce who we are just to make sure that they're in a position they can take the call.
That must be a tricky moment for you, telling. I guess you guys get a lot of bad reactions as well as good ones on that, right? That can be tricky.
Yeah, we do. So you do get the go away and phone straight down.
How dare you? Where'd you get my number and all that?
Yeah, I'm in a meeting and it's. Why did you answer your phone sometimes?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, we do get a few of those. Some of the best calls that we've had, actually, the telemarketer will pick up the phone and they'll go, how are you doing today? They go, oh yeah, brilliant, and they'll be in a very sort of monotone down sort of thing, and it's like, really, you don't sound, and it takes a real level of confidence, skill and expertise to do that, but actually that then elicits some really great conversations with some really great needs, because they're at work, they're having an issue with something, and sometimes it can coincide with what we're marketing and we're speaking to them about. So
But there's a hit rate, I guess you're used to with that. You've got a certain percentage you expect to be able to take on to the next stage after that. So you have a phone call, and hopefully you're not sworn at or whatever. You build a bit of a rapport. Yeah. What happens then?
So we work on a law of 10. So we make 100 calls. We'll speak to 10 people. Out of those 10 people, typically one books in for an appointment. Okay. So what the telemarketers are constantly doing is gathering information. They're building a picture and they're identifying, okay, this person is position A over here. There's a utopia of position B over here where they want to be as a business. And what they do really well is articulate how our client can be a bit of a vehicle to get them from A to B. So once that's happened and they've identified, so we use BANT, so budget, authority, need, and timescale to qualify our appointments. Once we've got all of that in place, what we're then doing is we're downloading that call, we're sending that to an account manager who then quality scores these calls and make sure that actually we've got everything we need in line with what makes a perfect appointment for our client that we set out from the outset. And once that's quality checked and approved that actually it fits the criteria, that's when we start sending things over to our client, the recordings, the lead sheets, diary management, all of that sort of stuff. And we're open, we want to catch up with our clients. We want them to listen to the recordings and we want to gain feedback, when we're speaking to them and improve and communicate, as I mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah, we use BANT as well. In fact, we had a whole podcast episode on BANT talking about that and other qualification mnemonics, lots of other medpics and Scotsman and all that sort of thing. But yeah, BANT's a nice and easy one to get your head around.
It is. There's the spin one as well, but BANT, I think it actually is really succinct. It's got those 4 points and they're the really key bits that you need to understand.
Because I was interested in how you managed to do that job that anyone in-house would have to do as well, which is to make sure that you're not passing on leads that are really just, they've been bludgeoned into having the meeting just to get you off the phone. And one of the marketing pieces I read from your company the other day was exactly saying that some companies just do that. They bother people so much that they finally agree to a meeting. The last thing you want as one of your clients is to have someone agree to a call notionally. Then you pick up the phone and they say, I didn't even want to have this call anyway. Well, flipping it, I've just paid for that. What was the point of that? So I'm interested in that quality control bit. You're saying that that's done by a different person. So it can't be the person that made the call in the first place. And how do they manage the obvious conflict in their mind that if they approve this, then that's money for the company. And if they don't, they've got an upset telemarketer on their hands who's got to go away and get another 100 calls to get the next one.
Yeah. And so the way they do that typically is to escalate it to one of the leadership team. And but no, the account management team are great. And they are answerable to the clients at the end of the day. So they're catching up, and we've introduced that we catch up with our clients once every week for 15 to 20 minutes. They're answerable to the clients. So they are doing this almost playing devil's advocate and looking for reasons not to send the call over, because we really want to keep promoting that quality piece. So they're always looking for reasons not to send it, which sounds very pessimistic, but actually if it passes through, then they're quite strict with this. We know that actually we've got an appointment for our client that they can sit in front of this person and they've got a real opportunity to sell the services.
It's a bit like finished goods inspection in a factory, isn't it? You've got to make sure that if you're the last person to see this piece of work before the customer does, you're the voice of the customer, if you like. And if you don't get that right, you're not going to keep that contract for much longer. And I guess that's the ultimate litmus test, really, as to whether you're doing a good job or not. Do you keep these contracts for a long enough time?
That's it, isn't it? And, to be really crude about it, you're not going to send a chair out of production with 3 legs, are you? It's got to be right, it's got to be perfect, and it's got to,
And do you tend to have quite long-term contracts with people, or do you find that they get enough leads from a period of working with you, they then put it on ice for a little bit and then come back again later? What's the typical profile?
It's really interesting. So our average customer lifetime is 13 months. Okay, so just over a year with us. People leave we've been a little bit unlucky where we've worked with a couple of consultancy practices that have been just sort of eaten up by some of the big players, and they've been integrated into their companies. And of course, we sort of fall by the wayside because they can then do it in house. We've worked with construction businesses as well. Now it's around this time of year the construction businesses leave us because they go, we got so much work, thank you, so many quotes, don't need any more leads because, oh wow, we have got some building to do this summer. So there's a couple of reasons people leave, but around 13 months is our average sort of tenure of a client.
And question about your clients now, the people that you're getting the leads for, did they tend to use a CRM? I'm just interested in that, as listeners will know, because that's sort of part of our thing.
They do. So HubSpot is by far and away the biggest one that we ask if we can integrate with, if we can work on for them. There are a couple of others they use, but by and large HubSpot's the one that they tend to use the most, definitely.
And do you integrate with that directly yourself? Do you enter the records yourself on their HubSpot systems, or do you have a sort of an interface there where you hand over to them?
We hand over to them, so we don't work directly in their systems. Ultimately, we don't really want to be meddling with things that, and clicking the wrong button here or there. So what we typically do is we'll send over the leads. Okay, we'll send over the call recordings, and we will send them a weekly report. On there, we will format that weekly report with the data they've requested, so it's easily uploaded into their HubSpot account rather than us doing it ourselves. We'd rather keep them both separate because it has led to issues in the past, primarily around productivity.
So once it's gone through your quality control person, escalated if needed to senior management, and it's finally been deemed as a good one to pass on to the client, it then gets sent over. What information are you sending at that point? Is it just basically an email address and a bit of a summary of how you got there?
No, so we're really comprehensive in what we're sending out. And I think most businesses are with lead generation if it's qualified lead gen. So we'll send a call recording of that appointment being made by the telemarketer that they can listen to. We'll send a lead sheet as well. Now, that is a consolidated version of other conversations that have happened with that person. We'll also send in that email the score that we've given it and why we've given it that score. So we're sort of evidencing with the client that actually we listen to what you think a perfect appointment is. This is what we think it is. And that's really interesting because there can be, half a point or a point discrepancy with what the client thinks and what we think. And that, again, is something on our weekly catch-up meetings we go through, and we just try and make sure that we're on the same page. And it's cliche, and I hate it, but I'm going to say it anyway. The first lead should be the worst lead, okay? Because you're constantly learning, adapting, and evolving the process.
So you use that feedback from the client to say, well, I wouldn't have scored that a 7 out of 10. That was definitely no more than a 5 or whatever. Yeah. You're using that to then retrain your end and make sure that in future you wouldn't pass something through if it was too low a score.
Exactly that. And there are some that, they are on the cusp sometimes, but let's say, the need isn't incredibly strong, but actually it's a 10 billion turnover company and you're speaking to a C-suite exec, actually how many opportunities do you get for those conversations? So there has to be a little bit of a, to and fro in with that sort of thing. So
if it's a bigger opportunity, that you take a slightly lower score just in case and you chance your luck on it. Now, I'm sure, different types of contracts you'll do with companies will no doubt promise different numbers of leads, right? That's how you scale what you do, or you spend more or less. You presumably have a suite of offerings. But I guess there's also, you can't hit the ground running and in month one start getting results. So I would be fearful as a potential customer of your type of services that I'm going to be told I've got to do this for, it's going to take 6 months before we get up to speed, and I'm already in for 6 months worth of fees by then before I realise whether it's working or not. So how long typically, it's not overnight, is it? You don't hit the ground running, but how long would you say you'd have to give it before you can form a judgment?
3 to 6 months, and if I break that down slightly, so the first couple of weeks of a campaign, you can imagine it's the setting up of the LinkedIn and the messaging and things like that. Usually around the end of month 1, we'd get 1 to 2 appointments, and it's around week 6 that we're consistently hitting an appointment a week for our clients. Okay, our packages are 3, 4 or 6 appointments per month, and what we say is actually let's look at it a quarter at a time, because we're going to have a shortfall month 1, so therefore we'll roll that target over and we'll make sure we're achieving what we need to over that 3-month period. And again, we're constantly reviewing week on week, what objections are we hearing, what's hot in the market, what do we need to be saying, and we're reviewing that every single week just to make sure that we're on target, we're on track, and we're communicating. And I can't emphasize how key communication is between any client and supplier relationship, and none more so lead generation.
Yeah, sure. So it is really, the 6 months is maybe the top end, but you've got to be in this for long enough to give it a go. So if you're very skeptical, and I don't know if you have clients come on board like this, are you saying that until you've got a more positive view about how this might work, then maybe now isn't the right time for you? Are you in that bucket of people who maybe this isn't right for, if you're looking almost to come into it to prove that it doesn't work?
I think there's more often than not a sort of negative opinion of telemarketing, lead generation and that sort of thing. I think that any client that we work with has had a negative experience, or not necessarily negative, but maybe their expectations haven't been managed in the way it's we'll get you loads of leads tomorrow and you'll be a millionaire by Christmas, that sort of thing. And it's actually just making sure that, okay, understand that's, that experience that you've had. Actually, here's some tangible evidence, here's some references, here's some case studies, and this is how we work. You need to come into it eyes wide open though. We're going to give you the safety blanket of we're not going to tie you in for lengthy contracts. It's just a month notice at any point. So if you're unhappy, okay. But that's the safety blanket that we give them. But we do manage the expectations of you're not going to get an ROI in your first 2 weeks. You're probably not going to get an ROI in your first 2 months. 3 months onwards, we should start seeing you get some real, return for the money that you're spending.
But you're also saying that with these weekly calls and the updates on the leads, you'd probably see if something was going wrong or if there was a mismatch where this just wasn't going to work, you'd see that earlier, wouldn't you? Within 3 months, you'd start to see after the first month you've made, how many hundreds of calls you need. If you're on one of these 4 leads, you're going to make 400 calls, right? If having made 400 calls, you're getting absolutely nowhere, then presumably it's giving a bit of an early sign that, maybe this hasn't got legs, this one.
That's it. And we look at 3 things, again, going back to data, people, message. Okay, so we look at the data, we review that. Is this definitely the right data? The positive conversations that we've had, have we got enough of those people that we're speaking to? The messaging that we're using, the words that we're saying, are they the right words? Can we review that? And again, this is stuff that we do weekly. And then the people, all of our team are trained on each campaign. You'll see that some people gravitate towards a campaign, other people will go away from that campaign. But actually, have we got the right people on that campaign all of the time? Or do we need to, outside help? Do we need to, get other people on it? So we're constantly reviewing things and making sure that we're not.
That's fair enough.
In
I
that
suppose.
situation.
Yeah, just keep an eye on it. And what about the argument of, if this works, why wouldn't I bring it in-house? Why wouldn't I have my own team doing this? Where's the balance between where it works, having an in-house telemarketing lead gen team as opposed to using a company like yours?
11 years in recruitment. I was hoping you'd ask that question. So, the in-house piece, you do have control. That's that's one thing. Okay, what you've got to do is you've got to advertise to this person. You've got to train this person. You've got to get the software systems in place for this person to be able to do their job. Now, if you're going to be paying someone 20, 25 grand or whatever it is, and then look at the recruitment fees that your time on top of that for it then perhaps not to work, because it is quite a skilled position being able to, bang out 100 calls a day and really sort of articulate who you are and ask these open questions. So it's the cost of failure in that it far exceeds the cost of failure or risk associated to outsourcing it, in my opinion. And ultimately, do you want to be training someone to do this, or do you want 3 or 4 appointments in your diary? You've got the opportunity to sell and deliver, would be my argument, and is my argument against outsourcing or against doing it in-house.
Yeah, I must admit, the thought of, I suppose if you're on your own doing that, does it work better if you're part of a team doing that? Or I'm just thinking, if I was on my own making 100 calls a day in a company, I'd probably annoy everybody because it'd be just constant chatter. Maybe I'd be throwing the phone against the wall sometimes. I don't know. But maybe it helps to be in the room with other people doing the same thing, just for the camaraderie. And you must come off a call sometimes and you really want to throw the phone against the wall. So
I've seen it happen. So we're sort of a completely remote-based business now, so we all work from home. When we were in the office, there was that camaraderie, and there still is. So we've made steps now we've got a WhatsApp group. We've obviously got teams that we work on as well, and we really celebrate success in there. We also have 2 catch-up meetings a day, which are not your structured sort of, what this client's going on, what's going on with this client, what's going on with this. They're more like coffee breaks where we have a bit of a chat, what good calls have we had, what's going on, what bad calls have we had,
you wouldn't
who's
believe
told
it.
you to go away, this morning. And, we get some of those and we all have a laugh about it, and it's on to the next one. So I think you're right. Doing it on your own can be slightly soul destroying, as long as you've got that team around you, whilst not physically. Actually, twice a day you have them on Teams, you've got them on WhatsApp.
But your team is predominantly remote working then from now, so people presumably can find flexible times that work for them around school run, lunchtimes, whatever it may be. But it's got to be during the working hours of the day, right? Because that's when you're catching people at work.
As long as they're making calls between 9:30 and midday and sort of 1:30 and 4, then go and do the school run or go and do something else. We've employed an in-house counsellor as well, because these guys are dealing with rejection each and every day. So it's good for not all people take us up on it, but some people like a drop-in session just to vent sometimes, and I think that's
the mental health
key.
is going, that subject is going up the agenda of all businesses anyway, but yours, more than most I would imagine, will be exposed to incidents like that where you need that mental health first aid to come in and just help the situation.
Yeah, almost constant rejection, isn't it? If you're making 100 calls and
99 to 1.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So
you've got to be a certain type, I would have thought, to better take that.
Something we look for when we recruit is resilience. That is one of the things that we really, really look for when we recruit. Telemarketers, definitely. They've got.
I'm going to be controversial now then, because we talk about resilience a lot, and us old fogies think that we were brought up in tougher times. Tell kids today they wouldn't believe it. And I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but I do wonder, when you look for resilience in your recruits, do you find that there's an age profile to it, or do you find it's really across all ages, all sort of backgrounds in terms of skills and previous jobs they've come from?
Well, that's another thing we look for. So someone that's been either a manager, has managed someone else's business, or has run their own business as well is really key. It does narrow down the sort of the pool of talent that we're looking for. And you don't get it right all of the time, but those are the things we look for. So have they had experience in running a business or someone else's business or whatever that might be? Have they shown the resilience? We always ask them, okay, you're having a bad day, that bad day turns into a bad week. How do you then combat that for the next week? And these are the sort of key questions that we ask to make sure that actually they're people that aren't going to take everything personally, I think is really, really key. From sort of an age and a demographic profile, slightly the more mature tend to be slightly more resilient, I must admit.
Just a life experience thing, I guess.
I think that's it. And it's time served in the sector. You know, if you've done this job for more than 10 years, you're probably going to be pretty resilient anyway. Yeah. So,
okay. Are you worried about AI?
I think the same as 10 years ago. In 10 years, I think the key thing will be speaking to people on the telephone. And because a lot of the time we're selling to business owners, and a lot of lead generation companies are selling to business owners, everything you're selling typically leads back to an end result, which is them fulfilling their dreams, their life ambitions, them growing their business, time out of the bit, whatever it is. And that's an emotional sell. And I think that AI is wonderful and there's so many applications to it. Actually speaking to someone on a telephone that shows empathy, they're actively listening and they're actively helping you build a dream and a picture of what you can achieve with the help of the clients. I don't think you can replace that necessarily with AI. However, at the rate it's advancing, who knows? Well, who knows,
yeah. But they do say that some of the most protected professions, skills, jobs, whatever, from the relentless seemingly march of AI are those where empathy is really needed. And it's hard to mimic empathy, even though I know AI does a reasonable job in some cases, but I think it's still fairly superficial. So it's a question of how far it advances. Could it really ring somebody up, cope with those objections? And almost like say, are you okay? Yeah. Well, you don't sound it. Can an AI bot do that?
When we get AI bots working in the NHS and in care homes, then I think that's when I'll start worrying about lead generation and other things, because that's really is, and it's that empathy, it's that human to human touch and everything else.
No, I am interested in the whole field that you work in, because other areas of lead generation are changing so fast. The idea of, in the old days, just write lots of blogs, have lots of expert content on your website and use that as a magnet for SEO. That's really changing a lot now, especially with the advent of other ways of searching for information which don't reference their sources, like ChatGPT and those sort of things. So, this old-fashioned just ring people, it's quite interesting. It's a bit like that advice of just send out a couple of flyers or write a letter. Yeah. It's almost its unusualness that makes it stand out a little bit.
It is, yeah. We used to, and this is slightly previous life, used to do something with the mail. So we used to send or go out and hand deliver a letter, and it was called a 4x4. So at the same time, every week for 4 weeks, we'd go and give a letter with, I don't know, a puzzle piece or something like that. And they need 5 pieces for the puzzle, but they wouldn't get it on the 5th week. So there'd be where's my puzzle piece? So that's a bit of a different way of doing it. But yeah, you can almost adapt the older methodologies to more recent times, can't you, to be successful?
Clever tricks, yeah. It's all human psychology, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So, we said at the top of the program that we come back and cover some horror stories of where it all goes wrong. So, people always love these sort of things when we talk about how to learn from other people's mistakes, really. But give us an example of where it just did not work.
Would you like staff? Would you like clients?
Where to start? Yeah. Well, I guess from our listeners' point of view, they're thinking, how do I avoid being one of those examples in the future that gets talked about on a podcast where it just absolutely was a car crash? They tried to sell our service and there was no chance at all. Couldn't get the message across, couldn't get people to agree to an appointment or whatever.
So we've so one particular client and sort of instance springs to mind. We work with a business that wasn't communicating with, and this is actually why we started to learn that lesson. They must communicate and share our values. We sent across, we started working with this business, absolutely set up great, everything fine, communication was absolutely on point. We sent across 6 leads in the first 2 months, gained no feedback, gained absolutely nothing, and then got an absolutely blazing phone call of actually, who are you? Why are you sending me leads? I've never spoken with this business, but who on earth do you think you are? And it was like there was just some sort of, I don't know, this different personality to the one that we'd been speaking to that disappeared for 6 weeks, and then just came back to us and said, well, why on earth are you sending me these leads? And we checked in, and actually this person was dealing with was fine, of sound mind and everything, but just completely forgot about the initial meeting that we had and everything else. And we got a real kick in from someone when they said, well, I've got 2 invoices here from you now.
I was going to say, surely you're under contract, you're invoicing them. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And that was really interesting, really opened our eyes to, if they're not going to commit to a weekly catch-up meeting with us, then we're not going to, we can't continue to work with these people, because we can't have that situation. But really bizarre receiving the phone call of abuse and asking how do we think we are for sending her appointments and
They weren't grateful for the appointments.
No, absolutely not. Didn't turn up to any of them either. Which was absolutely.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
was
Very interesting, James. Thank you very much for coming in. I think that's been quite educational for lots of people, certainly me, because I hadn't really looked too deeply into this. It seems a bit old school these days with so much digital, but I think it's got the chance of it maybe coming around again and having a relevance with everything else that's going on.
No,
so
absolutely.
Thanks very much, and good luck with your business.
And likewise, thank you ever so much for having me. Appreciate
not
it.
at all. Thanks. So thank you very much for listening to another podcast of the SME Growth Podcast from Well Meadow. And as I said at the top, we're trying to come up with different and interesting subjects for you as an owner or a manager of a small or medium-sized enterprise every week to consider. Just maybe challenge your thinking a little bit. And as we say every week, please tell your friends about us. Either follow us on whatever podcast platform you found us on, or drop an email or send a link to one of your friends. Tell them about it in the pub and just say that this is a podcast they might quite like to listen to. So thank you very much again for listening. Tune in next week for our next episode. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.